All right, let's talk about Danny 5. Danny 5 is a big one. This is, of course, the chapter where Viserys dies. There's a lot of weird aspects to this chapter, a lot of strange conspiracies, a lot of things that happen in it that are laughable because they're just impossible. At the same time, a lot of care is taken in this chapter to make it exciting and to paint the Dothraki as this strange, foreign, weird, creepy culture. A lot of care is done in paralleling Daenerys to the Eddard story here. Let's keep in mind that it's just next chapter that Robert dies and Viserys dies here. So you have the two kings dying in two parallel chapters, both men drunkenly in pursuit of a purity that is long gone. Let's keep in mind that Viserys is always wanting to get the crown back, his mother's crown that he had to sell. And so he was looking for his crown, and here he gets crowned. Robert was always talking about how he just wanted things to be simple. He wanted to go. He hated being a king, and he just wanted to go off and have adventures and hunt and in the end, these pursuits, Robert is literally seeking a white stag, like a symbol of purity in the woods. So both men in their search for innocence and purity and their childhood are killed, are drunkenly killed with a big team of dark conspiracy around them. But let's get into it a bit. There's a lot here. Even though it's a short chapter, it's really, really dense. The heart was steaming in the cool evening air when Khal Drogo set it before her, raw and bloody. His arms were red to the elbow. Behind him, his blood riders knelt on the sand beside the corpse of the wild stallion, stone knives in their hands. The stallion's blood looked black in the flickering orange glare of the torches that ringed the high chalk walls of the pit. So, here we're really focusing on the creepiness and the primitive aspects to them. They have stone knives. Who has stone knives? But very primitive peoples, and dealing with things like blood and just the gore of everything to make it all seem foreign and primitive and creepy. Dany touched the soft swell of her belly. Sweat beaded her skin and trickled down her brow. She could feel the old woman watching her, the ancient crones of Vastoth Rock, with eyes that shone dark as polished flint in their wrinkled faces. She must not flinch or look afraid. I am the blood of the dragon, she told herself, as she took the stallion's heart in both hands, lifted it into the mouth, and plunged her teeth into the tough, stringy flesh. Again, we're just supposed to be thinking how creepy this whole thing is as outsiders, but Dany is fully taking it in and embracing it. Let's remember that Viserys specifically said that last chapter that this was a mummer's show, that this is an act, that this was just a dumb ceremony. But Dany has fallen into it and is a true believer. She truly thinks that her performance here makes a difference and that it'll affect the health of her child and everything. She has gone 100% into this ceremony as if it matters. Viserys clearly said beforehand it didn't. It was just a mummer's show. They're going to claim that the child is a prophecy baby no matter what. It's silly, but Dany has believed it, and as we go into it, we get caught up in it because we're in Dany's point of view. We think it really makes a difference. Warm blood filled her mouth and ran down over her chin. The taste threatened to gag her, but she made herself chew and swallow. The heart of a stallion would make her son strong and swift and fearless, or so the Dothraki believed, but only if the mother could eat it all. If she choked on the blood or retched up the flesh, the omens were less favorable. The child might be stillborn or come forth weak, deformed, or female. This is a little joke here. This is a weird contradiction here with the and I don't mean contradiction in any sort of bad sense. There's lots of cultures that have contradictory elements to them, but the Dothraki are very, very sexist. It's a very, very sexist society, and being born woman is on the same level as stillborn, weak, and deformed. So this is how sexist it is, and yet we're going to be talking about the Dosh Khaleen here, and whether or not they truly have some sort of underlying power in the in Dothraki society. It's kind of up for debate. But it's not uncommon for a very sexist society to have one aspect of it be favorable, and for a persecuted group. It's not. Her handmaids had helped her ready herself for the ceremony, despite the tender mother's stomach that had afflicted her these past 2 moons. Dany had dined on bowls of half-clotted blood to accustom herself to the taste. Often women get morning sickness is what they're talking about. Morning sickness comes at about 2 months pregnant. And so they're saying here that she's had morning sickness for about 2 months. And so maybe Dany is about 4 months pregnant is the guess here. If Dany had dined on bowls of half-clotted blood, accustomed to herself to the taste, and Irri had made her chew strips of dried horse flesh until her jaws were aching. She had starved herself for a day and a night before the ceremony in hopes that the hunger would help her keep down the raw meat. We're just supposed to think how odd and disgusting and primitive and foreign the Dothraki culture is. The wild stallion's heart was all muscle, and Dany had to worry it with her teeth and chew each mouthful a long time. No steel was permitted within the sacred confines of Dothraki, beneath the shadow of the Mother of Mountains. She had to rip the heart apart with her teeth and nails. Her stomach roiled and heaved, yet she kept on, her face smeared with the heart's blood that sometimes seemed to explode against her lips. I suppose as the stone daggers are because there's no weapons allowed in no swords, no steel was permitted in Dothraki, so they had to use the stone daggers. Still, the stone daggers are there to emphasize a Stone Age kind of mentality. But yes, that's why they're using the stone daggers, because of the steel not being permitted, or steel weapons at least not being permitted. Which really all of it kind of makes Viserys' naivety about his safety in the city ridiculous. I mean, you can use rocks, you can use stone blades, you can strangle people, you could choke people. It's just all these things that you could bludgeon someone to death. I mean, there's a million ways to kill somebody without cutting them. Her stomach roiled and heaved, and yet she kept on, her face smeared with heart's blood that sometimes seemed to explode against her lips. Khal Drogo stood over her as she ate, his face as hard as a bronze shield. His long black braid was shiny with oil. He wore gold rings in his mustache, gold bells in his braid, and a heavy belt of solid gold medallion around his waist. But his chest was bare. You can kind of tell that this chapter's purpose, just like the last chapter about the conversation with Cersei, is the purpose. The purpose of this chapter is to kill Viserys. And so you can sense that George is padding out the front with these descriptions. I mean, we're 5 chapters into the Daenerys story. Like, why do we need a description of Khal Drogo at this point? Well, he needs to fill space. She looked at him whenever she felt her strength failing, looked at him and chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed. Toward the end, Dany thought she glimpsed a fierce pride in his dark almond-shaped eyes, but she could not be sure. The Khal's face did not often betray the thoughts within. And finally it was done. Her cheeks and fingers were sticky as she forced on the last of it. Only then did she turn back to the old women, the crones of the Dosh Khaleen. Kalaka Dothrai Mahana, she proclaimed in her best Dothraki. The prince rides inside me. She had practiced the phrase for days with her handmaid Jiqui. The oldest of the crones, a bent, shriveled stick of a woman with a single black eye, raised her arms on high. Kalaka Dothrai, she shrieked. The prince is riding. So the crone is given one eye. And later there's more with her with regards to how important this crone is, looking for visions and smoke. Keep in mind that at this time, Bloodraven is not a character. George has not thought about Bloodraven. However, the whole one-eyed thing comes from Odin, that somehow like Odin loses an eye and gains wisdom. And therefore any one-eyed character is seen as old and wise, just like Odin. There's also the idea of three eyes. Three eyes in Eastern religion is an opening. There's an opening and an understanding, spiritual awakening, understanding of the universe with a third eye and the soul. So those two things are conflated. Like as long as it's not two eyes, three eyes, that's great. That's great. One eye, that's great. Wise, but not two. Which is why we have conflation later of Bloodraven, who's one-eyed with the three-eyed crow and things like that. Like it doesn't matter. It's just George is just tapping into the symbolism of one eye and three eyes, which kind of crosses over. I mean, it's, for the most part, it's just wisdom. When you have any realm of any number of eyes besides two, it seems you're wise, whether it be one or three. As long as you're not blind. But that's where it is. I think it fits fine in retrospect that she is a Bloodraven stand-in, but that just kind of works later, because keep in mind at the time, no Bloodraven in George's mind. He's just chosen this Odin-like woman to be wise, and she has one eye. He is riding, the other women answered. Rock, 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 Hodge, they proclaimed. A boy, a strong boy, really pushing the sexism here. Boy, strong boy. Better than a girl. Bells rang, a sudden clangor of bronze birds. A deep-throated war horn sounded its low note. The old woman began to chant. Underneath their painted leather vests, their withered dugs swayed back and forth, shiny and with oil and sweat. The eunuchs who served them threw bundles of dried grass into a great bronze brazier. The clouds of fragrant smoke rose up towards the moon and the stars. The Dothraki believed the stars were horses made of fire, a great herd that galloped across the sky by night. As the smoke ascended, the chanting died, and the ancient crone closed her single eye, the better to peer into the future. The silence that fell was complete. Dany could hear the distant call of night birds, the hiss and crackle of the torches, the gentle lapping of the water from the lake. The Dothraki stared at her with eyes of night waiting. Khal Drogo laid his hand on Dany's arm. She could feel the tension in his fingers. Even a Khal as mighty as Drogo could know the fear when Adash Khalid peered into the smoke of the future. At her handmaids fluttered anxiously. It's rather funny. I mean, I think this is kind of funny because the crone is supposed to be peering into the smoke of the future, but she's doing it with a closed eye. So she's not peering into anything. She's, the smoke is there. Oh, there's the smoke of the future, but she's closed her eye. I mean, you could argue, oh, it's in her mind's eye. Then what the hell are you doing with the fucking grass? But of course, George uses this idea again with Melisandre staring into the flames. A lot of characters stare into flames. I mean, I could say that Balon Greyjoy stares into the flames. Makoro stares into the flames. A lot of characters later on are Stannis stares into flames. But here, the Dash Khaleen, this woman of the Dash Khaleen is staring into the smoke with her eyes closed to see visions of the future, just like staring into the flames. And it's hard to say at this point how much George had known about what was going on. Like, had he come up um, with the religion of the Red God yet? Because it's he's written about how Stannis has been surrounding himself with and been gathering swords, but how much has he been thinking about Melisandre as a character? I don't know. But here, this idea is just gone again. That somehow we're gonna see the future here. But of course, Viserys told us this is all a show. This is all bullshit. They were gonna do this no matter what. Finally, the crone opened her eye and lifted her arms. "I've seen his face and heard the thunder of his hooves," she proclaimed in a thin, wavery voice. "The thunder of his hooves." So this is very much later on, this idea of staring into flames and seeing Azor Ahai. Here she's staring into the smoke and seeing the stallion who mounts the world. There's never a connection between the two. Like, no one's ever made those connections. Unlike, say, the prince that was promised. Like, no one has actively connected the two. But Dany kind of thinks about it in A Dance with Dragons. Somebody brings up a half harpy, half dragon prophecy, and she then connects it with the stallion that mounts the world, and it's this comment that it's all the same. It's all the same bullshit kind of idea. But it's funny that it is kind of the same thing, that she's seeing the face of their savior. The thunder of hooves, the others chorused. As swift as the wind he rides, and behind his Khalasar covers the earth, men without number with erics shining in their hands and blades of razor grass. Fierce as a storm this prince will be. His enemies will tremble before him, and their wives will weep tears of blood and rend their flesh in grief. The bells in his hair will sing his coming, and the milkmen in the stone tents will fear his name. So this idea is that, the stallion that mounts the world will unite all Dothraki and conquer the world. There's this aspect of, a manifest destiny, conquest aspect to their religion. That's also apparent in the religion of the Red God, that they are, George writes about unstoppable, intolerant evangelical religions a lot. And this is one of them, that on a fundamental belief, their fundamental belief is to conquer all. How when a religion has the belief that it will conquer all, can it actually live side by side with others? Well, I mean, it can't really, right? Unless the belief changes or the people stop following that aspect of it, and then the religion changes if it does that. But George writes about this a lot, how dangerous evangelical zealotry can be, or just the conquest zealotry. Mentions the milkmen and the stone tents will fear his name. I think at this time, milkmen, probably you're supposed to think of the Westerosi with their stone tents being castles, obviously. Later on in A Clash of Kings, milkmen becomes Carthene, or anybody pale-skinned. Milkmen for the Carthene is capitalized. Here it's lowercase. And Jorah is later called a milkman. But, there's this idea that milk is, somehow milk instead of is weak blood or something, that white people are weaker because they're paler. But it's an interesting retroactive thing if we assume that actually the prophecy has to do with Carthene the whole time. Probably not what George was thinking at the time, but an interesting thing later, that if you're going to name the Carthene the milkmen, then the prophecy is not about going west, it's about going east, which switches the whole narrative. It's something clever that George kind of allowed in the story by naming the Carthene later milkmen. Switching, it turns this prophecy around. But obviously at the time, he wasn't thinking about the Carthene. The Carthene were not, yet part of the story. The old woman trembled and looked at Dany, almost as if she were afraid. "The prince is riding, and he shall be the stallion that who mounts the world." I think they switched from stallion who mounts the world to stallion that mounts the world a lot. Was it Prince that was promised? Prince who was promised? I think they do. I think they do both. Let me double check on the stallion that mounts the world versus the stallion that who mounts the world. Because yeah, both are used. Stallion that mounts the world and stallion who mounts the world. Both are used. The stallion who mounts the world! The onlookers cried in echo until the night rang to the sound of their voices. The one-eyed crone peered at Dany. What he shall be called, the stallion who mounts the world. And keep in mind, this is such like an epic ceremony that as a reader, you're totally pulled in. You're like, oh my gosh, this prophecy stuff is totally true. She stood to answer. He shall be called Rhaego, she said, using the words that Jiqui had taught her. Her hands touched the swell beneath her breasts protectively as a roar went up from the Dothraki. Rhaego, they screamed. Rhaego, Rhaego, Rhaego. The name was still ringing in the ears as Khal Drogo led her from the pit. The Blood Riders fell in behind them. A procession followed them onto the God's Way, the broad grassy road that ran through the heart of Feastoth Rock from the Horse Gate to the Mother of Mountains. The crones of the Dosh Khaleen came first, with their eunuchs and slaves. Some supported themselves with tall carved staves as they struggled along on ancient shaking legs, while others walked as proud as any horse lord. Each of the old women had been a Khaleesi once, and their lord husbands died, and a new Khal took his place at the front of the riders with a new Khaleesi mounted beside him. They were sent here to reign over the vast Dothraki nation. Even the mightiest of Khals bowed to the wisdom and authority of the Dosh Khaleen. Still, it gave Dany the shivers to think that one day she might join them, whether she willed it or no. And so here is this bit of the contradiction, and we don't really know what's going on 100%. Certainly in the show, they kind of reveal, no, the Dosh Khaleen doesn't have any power. But Dany here clearly thinks they do. What wisdom are they talking about? Are they talking about just this prophecy ceremony and what they give, that wisdom? Because if Viserys says this is all a mummer's show, then they give the same show every time. Everybody's the stallion that mounts the world. And, they're bowing to, what wisdom are they really bowing to? There's nothing if the Dosh Khaleen say the same thing every time. So it's a mystery whether the Dosh Khaleen really do have power. Obviously, in a Clash of Kings, we get a vision that Dany is going to be, that the Dosh Khaleen are all going to bow before her at some point. And so that maybe as the Dosh Khaleen, Dany regains power among the Dothraki, but it's very hard to say. That's not exactly how the show went. The show went, she joined the Dosh Khaleen, and then they had no power, and so she wrested power from everyone through force. Behind the wise woman came the others, Khal Ogo and his son, the Kalaka Fogo, Khal Jomo and his wives, the chief men of Drogo's Khalasar, Dany's handsmaids, the Khal's servants and slaves and more. Bells rang and drums beat a stately cadence as they marched along the God's Way. Stolen heroes and gods of dead peoples brooded in the darkness beyond the road. Alongside the procession, slaves ran lightly through the grass with torches in their hands, and the flickering flames made the great monuments seem almost alive. All atmosphere, because we're still just trying to get to Viserys. What's his meaning, name Rhaego? Khal Drogo asked as they walked, using the common tongue of the Seven Kingdoms. She had been teaching him a few words when she could. Drogo was quick to learn when he put his mind to it, though his accent was thick and barbarous. So thick and barbarous that neither Ser Jorah nor Viserys could understand a word he said. Again, kind of weird that Khal Drogo was visiting and summering in Pentos, living in a manse, wearing silks, and doesn't know any foreign languages. I mean, he should know High Valyrian, but But at least she's teaching him common tongue. My brother Rhaegar was a fierce warrior, my son in stars, she told him. He died before I was born. So Jorah says that he was the last of the dragons. Khal Drogo looked down at her. His face was a copper mask, yet under the long black mustache drooping beneath the weight of his gold rings, she thought she glimpsed the shadow of a smile. Is good name, Daenerys' wife, moon of my life, he said. Yeah, though I do wonder, like, you know, what does Rhaegar mean? What does it sound like in his culture? You know, she just kind of invented this word, Rhaego. You know, it wouldn't necessarily work in other cultures, just like taking a name and then somehow shifting the sound around. You know, you might end up naming him something crazy like butt. You know, you never know what Rhaego means in Dothraki. She probably checked though with Irri and Cheekway. Is Rhaego a good name? It means butt, Dothraki. It means butt, Khaleesi. They rode to the lake, the Dothraki called the Womb of the World, surrounded by a fringe of reeds. Its water was still calm. 1,000 years ago, Jiku told her the first man had emerged from its depths, riding upon the back of the first horse. So this idea that she's being reborn again in the womb of the world. The procession waited on the grassy shore as Dany stripped her and let her soiled clothing fall to the ground. Naked, she stepped gingerly into the water. Irri said the lake had no bottom. But Dany felt soft mud squishing between her toes as she pushed through the tall reeds. The moon floated on the still black waters, shattering and reforming as the ripples washed over her. Goose pimples rose on her pale skin, and coldness crept into her thighs and kissed her lower lips. The stallion's blood had dried on her hands and around her mouth. Dany cupped her fingers and lifted the sacred waters over her head, cleansing herself and the child inside, while all the Khal and others looked on. She heard the old woman of Doshkaline muttering to the others as they watched, and wondered what they were saying. So, you know, this is the big reoccurring aspect of this chapter, is there is a lot of communication that is misunderstood. A lot of I can't hear that. There's a lot of stuff in different languages. A lot of people needing to translate something and the translation not being heard. This happens a lot. When she emerged from the lake, shivering and dripping, her handmaid Dariah hurried to her with a robe of painted sand silk. This just goes on and on, right? Like this is all filler, padding out the chapter. But Khal Drogo waved her away. She was looking on her swollen breasts and the curve of her belly with approval, and Dany could see the shape of his manhood pressing through his horsehide trousers, below the heavy gold medallion on his belt. Oh, we're introduced to the gold medallions. She went to him and helped him unlace. Then her huge Khal took her by the hips and lifted her up in the air as if he might lift a child. The bells in his hair rang softly. She is a child. That's kind of the joke here. He lifts her up as if he might lift a child. Well, she is a child. I mean, she's what, 14 or 15 years old at this point? Yeah. Dany wrapped her arms around his shoulder and pressed her face against his neck as he thrust himself inside her. 3 quick strokes and he was done. Okay. The stallion who mounts the world, Drogo whispered hoarsely. His hands still smelled of horse blood. He bit at her throat hard in the moment of pleasure, and when he lifted her off, his seed filled her and trickled down the inside of her thighs. Only then was Dariah permitted to drape her in the scented sand silk, and Irri to fit soft slippers onto her feet. The point again of all of this is that we are looking at a culture that is foreign and different. They are having sex in public. They are eating raw horse meat. They are doing all sorts of crazy things differently. And people do not understand. This is a foreign culture, and we do not understand it, is the idea. Khal Drogo laced himself up and spoke a command, and his horses were brought to the lakeshore. Koholo had the honor of helping the Khaleesi onto her silver. Drogo spurred his stallion, and set off the God's way beneath the moon and stars. On her silver, Dany easily kept pace. The silk tenting that roofed Khal Drogo's hall had been rolled up tonight, and the moon followed them inside. Flames leapt 10 feet in the air, and 3 huge stone-lined fire pits. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat and curdled fermented mare's milk. The hall was crowded and noisy when they entered, and the cushions packed with those whose rank and name were not sufficient to allow them at the ceremony. The hall was crowded and noisy when they entered, the cushions packed with those whose rank and name were not sufficient to allow them at the ceremony. Okay, so this is a huge, huge hall, and thousands of people are here, and not everybody could fit at the chalk pit where she ate the heart. As Dany rode beneath the arched entry and up the center aisles, every eye was on her. The Dothraki screamed out comments on her belly and her breasts, hailing the life within her. She could not understand all they shouted, but one phrase came clear: "The stallion that mounts the world," she heard, bellowed in 1,000 voices. The sounds of drums and horns swirled into the night. Half-clothed women spun and danced on low tables amid joints of meat and platters piled high with plums and dates and pomegranates. Many of the men were drunk on clotted mare's milk, yet Dany knew no Erics would clash tonight. Not here in the Sacred City, where blades and bloodshed were forbidden. There is our, letting us know. Of course, we're all wrapped up in this too. Okay, we're thinking, oh my gosh, this ceremony is true. We're totally getting this Dothraki army, and they are going to invade. This is all getting set up. Meanwhile, over in Westeros, everybody's fighting amongst themselves, and we've got this great juxtaposition. Oh, Dany's got all this power. She's coming with all this power, and the Westerosi are falling apart. Khal Drogo dismounted and took his place on the high bench. Khal Jomo and Khal Ogo, who had been in base Dothraki with their Khalasars when they arrived, were given seats of high honor to Drogo's left and right. In many ways, these are very similar. You've got daises and seats of honor. The blood riders of the 3 Khals sat below him, farther down Khal Jomo's 4 wives. Dany climbed off her silver and gave another thing, 4 wives, so polytheists, So everything is to make us uncomfortable as Westerners, with our monotheist, sex in private rooms, cooked food ways. Dany climbed off her silver and gave the reins to one of her slaves, and slavery too. As Jorah and Irri arranged her cushions, she searched for a brother. Even across the length of the crowded hall, Viserys should have been conspicuous with his pale skin, silvery hair, and beggar's rags. But she did not see him anywhere. Her glance roamed the crowded tables near the walls, where men whose braids were even shorter than their manhoods sat on frayed rugs and flat cushions around low tables. But all the faces she saw had black eyes and copper skin. She spied Ser Jorah Mormont near the center of the hall, close to the middle fire pit. It was a place of respect, if not high honor. The Dothraki esteemed the knight's prowess with the sword. Dany sent Jiqui to bring him to our table. Mormont came at once and went to one knee before her. "Khaleesi," he said, "I am yours to command." She patted the stuffed horsehide cushion beside her. "Sit and talk with me. You honor me." The knight seated himself cross-legged on the cushion. A slave knelt before him, offering a wooden platter full of ripe figs. Ser Jorah took one and bit it in half. "Where's my brother?" Dany asked. "He ought to have come by now for the feast." And now we get to the weird conspiracies. Now remember, this is a parallel chapter to Robert dying, and we know that Robert's death involves at least a conspiracy to buy Cersei with the strong wine. She is trying to make him drunk so that he will make a mistake and die. It is the exact same situation here. Viserys is going to, because of his drunkenness, is going to make a mistake and die. And I would argue that it's at least presented here that we're supposed to be suspicious of Jorah. Whether Jorah actually planned all this is up for debate, but I would say that reading this, you are supposed to come away suspicious of Jorah. He says, "I saw his grace this morning. He told me he was going to the Western market in search of wine. Wine, she said doubtfully. Viserys could not abide the taste of fermented mare's milk, and the Dothraki drank. She knew that. And he was oft at the bazaars these days, drinking with the traders who came in great caravans from east and west. He seemed to find their company more congenial than hers. Wine, Sir Jorah confirmed. He has some thought to recruit men for his army from the sellswords who guard the caravans. A servant girl laid a blood pie in front of him, and he attacked it with both hands. Now, here's the other thing, is that in fiction, it is a trope that when people eat, it means they're not really concerned with the subject at hand. Like you'll see those things where like the coroner comes in and he's eating a sandwich and he's not at all affected by dead bodies. Dany is talking about a very serious situation here. Viserys is missing, and here Jorah is just not concerned, and he is just chowing down on food. So, is that wise? She asked. He has no gold to pay soldiers. What if he's betrayed? So right here is why aren't you doing your job? You're his sworn shield. You're a knight. Caravan guards were seldom troubled troubled much by thoughts of honor, and the usurper in King's Landing would pay well for her brother's head. You ought to have gone with him to keep him safe. You are his sworn sword. Boom. This is a pretty serious accusation. I mean, think of it this way. I mean, if you were would the Hound have left Joffrey in a major city? What I'm thinking of sworn swords, and let Joffrey like wander and cause trouble, would that have happened? Would any of the Kingsguard have let Robert walk around by himself in a town? Would they have let Robb Stark walk around by himself without somebody like Great John or Theon Greyjoy like protecting him? Like clearly not. So this is very, 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 very weird. I think you're supposed to be very suspicious of Jorah here. I mean, Dany tells him straight up, you're not doing your job. And he says, we are in Vaes Dothraki, reminded him, so no man may carry a blade here or shed a man's blood. And this is just also really dumb. Like, as immediately Dany disproves this. Yet men die, Jogo told me. Some of the traders have eunuchs with them, huge men who strangle thieves with wisps of silk. That way no blood is shed and the gods are not angered. And I mean, Jorah should know this. He's the one that's been telling Dany about Dothraki culture for the last few months. He knows this. And what's his response? That, I better go find should I go find Viserys right now? Oh no, what a mistake. Then let us hope your brother will be wise enough not to steal anything. I mean, that brazen response. So Jorah, and then wiped the grease off his mouth with the back of his hand and leaned close over the table. Look how disrespectful he is here. He had planned, then he mentions, he had planned to take your dragon's eggs until I warned him that I'd cut off his hand if he so much touched them. So here we go. The sworn shield has admitted to threatening his king. And then for a moment, Dany was so shocked she had no words. I mean, that's pretty shocking that the sworn sword has threatened his king and said he was going to cut off his hand. My eggs, but they're mine. Magister Illyria gave them to me a bride's gift. Why would Viserys want? They're only stones. The same could be said of rubies or diamonds or fire. Opals, princess, and the dragon eggs are rare by far. Those traders he's been drinking with would sell their own manhoods for even one of those stones. And all three, Viserys could buy as many sellswords as he might need. Okay. He can do what he wants. I mean, he's the king, right? Dany had not known, had not even suspected. Then he should have them. He does not need to steal them. He had only to ask, he's my brother, he's my true king. This is the proper belief here. Dany has the proper belief. Jorah out of nowhere is is all of a sudden treating Dany already as the true monarch. That he has already disowned Viserys. Before Viserys has even died, he has disowned Viserys. Viserys is already disposable. Yeah, and here he corrects her. He says, he is my brother and my true king. He is your brother, Sir Jorah acknowledged. So that's the thing. He is now saying that he is not a king. You know, he's my brother and my true king. Yeah, he's your brother. Jorah, his insubordination is outrageous here. You do not understand, sir. My mother died giving me birth, and my father and my brother Rhaegar. Even before that, I would never have known so much as their names if Viserys had not been there to tell me. He was the only one left, the only one. He is all I have. And then he dismisses her love for him once, said Sir Jorah. No longer, Khaleesi, you belong to the Dothraki now. In your womb rises a stallion who mounts the world. He held out his cup and his slave filled it with fermented mare's milk, sour smelling and thick with clots. Now he's just drinking in front of it. Dany waved her away. Even the smell of it made her feel ill, and she would have no chance. She would take no chances of bringing up the horse heart she had forced herself to eat. What does it mean? She asked. What is this stallion? Everyone is shouting at me, but I don't understand. The stallion is the Khal of Khals promised in the ancient prophecy child. He will unite the Dothraki into a single Khalasar and ride to the ends of the earth, or so it was promised. All the people of the world will be his herd. Of course, Viserys already mentioned this last chapter. They do it for everybody. It's a mummer's show. Oh, Dany said in a small voice, but he's trying to convince her that she's more important than she is. Oh, Dany said in a small voice. Her hand smoothed her robe down over the swell of her stomach. I named him Rhaego. A name to make the usurper's blood run cold. So here's the thing is really Jorah is looking at who is going to really conquer Westeros and overthrow Robert. Suddenly Dariah was tugging at her elbow. My lady, the handmaid whispered urgently. Your brother. Dany looked down the length of the long, roofless hall, and there he was, striding toward her. From the lurch in his step, she could tell at once that Viserys had found his wine and something that passed for courage. He was wearing his scarlet silks, soiled and travel-stained. I mean, he's been traveling for nearly a year. I don't know if his clothes have ever been washed. His cloak and gloves were black velvet, faded by the sun. His boots were dry and cracked. His silver blonde hair matted and tangled. A long sword swung from his belt in a leather scabbard. The Dothraki eyed the sword as he passed. Dany heard curses and threats and angry muttering rising all around her like a tide. The music died away in a nervous stammering of drums. A sense of dread closed around her heart. Go to him, she commanded Jorah. Stop him. Bring him here. Tell him he can have the dragon eggs if that's what he wants. The knight rode swiftly to his feet. Now here we have no idea what's going on. Is he going to tell him that he has the dragon eggs? Because that's all Viserys needs. He needs the dragon's eggs, and then he can go hire the sellswords, and he can, maybe try to conquer Westeros. Where's my sister? Viserys shouted, his voice thick with wine. I've come here for her feast. How dare you presume to eat without me? No one eats before the king. Where is she? The whore can't hide from the dragon. So, had Jorah gone with Viserys, he might have not gotten so drunk. But again, this is paralleling Robert's death. The powers that be wanted Robert drunk. Cersei wanted Robert drunk. Jorah, it seems, wants Viserys drunk in parallel structure. He stopped beside the largest of the three fire pits, peering around the faces of the Dothraki. There were 5,000 men in the hall. I mean, that's a lot of people. But only a handful who knew the common tongue. Yet even his words were incomprehensible. You had only to look at him to know that he was drunk. So Jorah went to him swiftly, whispered something into his ear, and took him by the arm, but Viserys wrenched free. So she told him, you can have the dragon eggs if you want. But what does he do? He takes him by the arm. He grabs a king by the arm. Like, and right here, Viserys has the appropriate reaction for a monarch. Keep your hands off me. No one touches the dragon without leave. I mean, take any of the other characters, how would have Robert acted? How would have Stannis acted, or Renly, or Balon? Maybe Robb Stark as a child would not act, in the same way, but all of them would act this way. No one touches a dragon without leave. So has he told him that, oh, you can have the eggs? Dany glanced up anxiously, up at the high bench. Khal Drogo was saying something to the other cows beside him. Khal Jomo grinned, and Ogo began to guffaw loudly. The sound of laughter made Viserys lift his eyes. Khal Drogo, he said thickly, his voice almost polite. I'm here for the feast. He staggered away from Jorah, making to join the three cows on the high bench. Khal Drogo rose, spat out a dozen words in Dothraki, faster than Dany could understand, and pointed. And here, Jorah is the one that translates. Jorah could have de-escalated the situation. But here he insults Viserys. This drunk Viserys, he already knows is like out of control. And what does he say? Khal Drogo says your place is not on the high bench. He translated for his brother. Khal Drogo says your place is there. Viserys glanced where the cow was pointing, at the back of the hall in the corner by the wall, deep in shadow, so better men would not need to look on them, sat the lowest of the low. Raw, unblooded boys, old men with clouded eyes and stiff joints, the dim-witted and the maimed, far from the meat and farther from honor. That is no place for a king, her brother declared. So, Khal Drogo does look like he was insulting Viserys. That's fun, but Jorah had a chance to de-escalate and he didn't. Is place, Khal Drogo answered in common tongue that Daddy had taught him. For Sorefoot King, he clapped his hands together. A cart, bring cart for Khal Ragat. 5,000 Dothraki began to laugh and shout. 5,000 heard him? It's a loud... 5,000 people heard him. That's impressive. That's no way 5,000 people could hear him talk like that. So Jorah was standing beside Viserys, screaming in his ears. But the roar of the hall was so thunderous that Dany could not hear what he was saying. So here we have, again, like what's going on? It's a mystery what the conversation is. And then her brother shouted back, and the two men grappled until Mormont knocked Viserys' bodily to the floor. So rather than de-escalating the situation, he starts screaming at Viserys and pushes Viserys to the ground. This is, it's her brother drew his sword. The bard's steel shone a fearful red in the glare of the fire pit. Keep away from me. Keep in mind that Viserys is pulling his sword out against Jorah. Jorah is the one now who has escalated Viserys to a fighting position. Because obviously Jorah can beat him up physically. But now Viserys wants to top Jorah, so now he's got the sword. Viserys with a sword can kill Jorah if Jorah is unarmed. So Jorah is the one that escalates things. It escalates Viserys to the point where he's drawn his sword. Viserys hissed. Sir Jorah backed off a step, and her brother climbed unsteadily to his feet. He waved the sword over his head, and the barbed blade that Magister Lirio had given him to make him seem more kingly. Dothraki were shrieking at him from all sides, screaming vile curses. Dany gave a wordless cry of terror. She knew what a drawn sword meant here, even if her brother did not. Obviously her brother should have figured it out. It's a level of naivety here that I can sneakily get around in your culture because of your rules. People break rules all the time. Like, why would anyone tolerate that stuff? It's a level of stupidity that's almost unbelievable. Her voice made Viserys turn her head, and he saw her for the first time. There she is, he said, smiling. He stalked towards her, slashing at the air as if to cut a path through a wall of enemies, though no one tried to bar his way. The blade you must not, she begged. Please, Viserys, it is forbidden. Put down the sword and come share my cushions. There's drink, food. Is it the dragon's eggs you want? You can have them. Only throw away your sword. Only throw away the sword. Now, that could have de-escalated the situation. Dany's actually being smart here. Food, drink, dragon eggs, just put away your sword. What does Jorah do? Do as she tells you, fool, Jorah shouted, before you get us all killed. Escalating again. Viserys laughed. They can't kill us. They can't shed blood here in their sacred city, but I can. Really stupid, considering that these choker guys are all over. He laid the point of the sword between Dany's breasts and slid it downward over the curve of her belly. I want what I came for, he told her. I want the crown he promised me. He bought you, but he never paid for you. Tell him I want what I bargained for, and I'm not taking you back. I'm taking you back. You and the eggs both. So here, he gets greedy. He could have gotten the eggs and left, but he wants Dany too. He can keep his bloody foal. I'll cut the bastard out and leave it for him. The sword point pushed through her silks and pricked at her navel. Viserys was weeping, she saw, weeping and laughing, both at the same time. The man who had once been her brother. Distantly from away, as from far away, Dany heard her handmaid Jiqui sobbing in fear, pleading that she dared not translate, but the call would bind her and drag her behind the horse all the way up the Mother of Mountains. She put her arm around the girl. Don't be afraid, she said. I shall tell him. She did not know if she had enough words, yet when she was done, Khal Drogo spoke a few brusque sentences in Dothraki, and she knew he understood. The son of her life stepped down from the high bench. What did he say? The man who had been her brother asked her, flinching. He'd grown so silent in the hall that she could hear the bells in Khal Drogo's hair, chiming softly with each step he took, his blood riders following him, 3 copper shadows. Daenerys had gone cold all over. He says you shall have a splendid golden crown that men shall tremble to behold. Viserys smiled and lowered his sword. That was the saddest thing, the thing that tore at her afterwards, the way he smiled. That is all I wanted, he said. What was promised. And it is true that this was promised, and Khal Drogo did spend time in the free cities. He knows what money is. There's markets in Vaes Dothrak. They did make a deal, and Khal Drogo did renege on it under this guise of like, we give gifts to each other in time. Like, that's a bunch of bull. They know how the rest of the world works, you know? People in China know that the rest of the world uses forks. It's they're not that, like, no one can be this dumb when the rest of the world uses money, and they use money in Vaes Dothrak, and Khal Drogo has been to Pentos and has a manse there to not know that he's cheating Viserys. Of course he's cheating Viserys, but he has all the power and doesn't care. So the crowning of Viserys. There, in history, I'd say in history, because these stories, like, keep in mind, up until maybe the 18th century, no one cared about writing unbiased history. Like, no one cared about what really happened in history. Everything was about storytelling, either in a myth sense or in aggrandizing the ruler sense or in a entertainment sense. So you've got historians like Suetonius, who is there for entertainment. So he's going to be writing these salacious tales. And then you have ones that, are there to prop up the current leader, propagandists and stuff like that. The idea of unbiased history is a very relatively new thing. So there are some cases in history of, yes, people being crowned, claims of people being crowned, or at least being made to swallow gold. I think there's one. Manius Achilles is one. His historian writing. I think Dio Cassius Dio writes about it like 1,000 years later, and then Crassus is said to have been made to eat solid gold, and then the Emperor Valerian, by coincidence, Valerian. The Emperor Valerian was also supposedly forced to eat gold. All three of them were forced to eat gold while in the East. This idea that these savage cultures are going to do something super, super cruel, like pour molten gold down somebody's throat to mock them. Did these things happen? Almost certainly not. Why waste the gold? But also gold melts at a pretty high temperature, like 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, like it's a kind of temperature that would just melt away your bones. Like it wouldn't even. It's so hot that it would melt away your bones. So this idea of like crowning somebody, well, it's just like like everything would just slough apart. Like you'd combust immediately. The bones would like combust. It's a ridiculous idea that you'd be taking molten gold and forcing someone to drink, because it would just go right through them and they'd die. I mean, immediately, instantly. So it's a little silly, and obviously there's problems here as well. But this is this idea that you're off in the East with these Eastern savages, and the savages are doing something cruel. I mean, they've already been eating raw flesh and horse and having sex in public and having all of these odd practices. And here, the sun of her life reached up, Dany slid an arm around his waist. The Cal said a word, and the blood riders leapt forward. Kotho seized the man who had been her brother by the arms. Hogo shattered his wrist with a single sharp twist with his huge hands. Kaholo pulled the sword from his limp fingers. Now even Viserys did not understand. "No," he shouted, "you cannot touch me. I am the dragon, I will be crowned." I mean, this ironic death kind of situation. Khal Drogo unfastened his belt. The medallions were pure gold, massive and ornate. No way that he could carry those pure gold medallions, massive pure gold medallions. That's damn heavy. Each one as large as a man's hand. Nope. That's too much gold. He shouted a command. Cook slaves pulled a heavy iron stew pot from the fire pit, dumped the stew onto the ground, and returned the pot to the flames. Drogo tossed in the belt and watched without expression as the medallions turned red and began to lose their shape. Ridiculous. I mean, first of all, like, there's stew getting cooked. So, like, you know, water boils at like 212, right? So, like, let's say the stew is getting cooked at, let's say it's going hotter. You know, the safe cooking temperature for meats is supposed to be for chicken is the highest. So 350? But you're talking like 1,700 degrees, 1,800 degrees to get gold to melt. There's just no way. There's just no way that you're going to be doing this. Like it's laughable. Just like the stories that it's based on are laughable. Like, what are you doing? Like when they took Crassus to throw molten and Emperor Valerian to pour gold down this throat, what do they do? Do they go to the blacksmith and have like, you know, like have the gold melted there and then pour it right there, then in there? Cause it's silly. She could see the fires dancing in the onyx of his eyes. A slave handed him a pair of thick horsehair mittens. He pulled them on, never so much as looking at the man. Viserys began to scream the high, wordless scream of the coward facing death. He kicked and twisted, whimpered like a dog, and wept like a child, but the Dothraki held him tight between them. So Jorah had made his way to Dany's side. He put his hand on his shoulder. "Turn away, my princess, I beg you." "No," she folded her arms across the swell of her belly protectively. At the last, Viserys looked at her. "Sister, please. Dany, tell them. Make them. Sweet sister." And so this is the idea, is that here she doesn't save him. She has a chance to save him, and she doesn't. She could have ordered the her Khal Drogo to stop, but she doesn't. But yeah, ridiculous situation. When the gold was half melted and starting to run, Drogo reached into the flames, snatched out the pot. "Crown," he roared. "Here, a crown for Cart King," and upended the pot over the head of the man who had been her brother. The sound Viserys Targaryen made when the hideous iron helmet covered his face was like nothing human. His feet hammered a frantic beat against the dirt floor, slowed and stopped. Thick globs of molten gold dripped down his chest, setting the scarlet silk smoldering, yet no drops of blood were spilled. I mean, he'd just be consumed. He'd just be consumed in flames. Like the bones would just melt right through. But you were supposed to think this is clever and fun. Ha ha. No drop of blood was spilled. This is a call. This is from Merchant of Venice, of course. The ideas of spilling a drop of blood. In that story, there is a desire to pay back a debt with a pound of flesh, but then they argue that yes, you ask for a pound of flesh, but you can't unless you did not ask for any drop of blood, and therefore the contract is null. But here, no drop of blood was spilled was the idea of this. He was no dragon, Dany thought, curiously calm. Fire cannot kill a dragon. I don't know. I mean, molten gold? So maybe. I don't know. Anyway, that's Daenerys 5. Again, I mean, very memorable chapter. With that ending and the standoff with Viserys. Clearly it was supposed to be paralleled to Robert and his death, and clearly Jorah is escalating things, and we're supposed to be suspicious of him. But in the end, Viserys dies, and Dany, I guess, seems okay with it, or at least dead inside or something. But yeah, next time we're getting back to the edited story for the death of Robert, and we'll probably catch some more parallels that I missed here because we did this one first. But all right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.